Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. It is Super Tuesday, a critical day in U.S. politics. As signs point to a Biden-Trump rematch, we're asking, how do you feel about how U.S. politics are shaping up this year? How do you think BC is affected by what happens south of the border? After 12:30, we'll take your calls on affordable childcare in this province. The BC government is facing criticism over lack of progress on $10 daycare. Have you struggled to find a space? And should this be an issue in this year's provincial election? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Yes, in the United States, Super Tuesday is underway. It is the most important day of voting yet in that country's presidential primary race. 15 states and 1 territory are in play, with more than 1/3 of the total delegates in both the Democratic and Republican races up for grabs. Joe Biden and Donald Trump both looking to cement their status as their respective parties' nominees. It is all but certain they both will. The polls are now open in all 15 of those states. For more on what to expect tonight, here's the CBC's Richard Madden. He's at a polling station in Fairfax, Virginia.
Trump is expected to have a pretty good night tonight. He had a significant win earlier this week after the Supreme Court rejected a lower court ruling in Colorado. Donald Trump can now stay on the ballot in all 50 states, and he is on the ballot, of course, in this primary ballot here in Virginia. So that makes the bigger story, if Donald Trump does win Super Tuesday, is what will happen to his sole challenger, Nikki Haley. She refuses to drop out of the race. She doesn't have nearly the amount of delegates Donald Trump has, and she's under pressure by Trump and his allies to drop out. But Haley insists that she's in it for the long haul. She doesn't plan to quit. But a poor showing here on Super Tuesday would really make it almost politically impossible. The math just wouldn't add up for Haley to win. But she insists that she isn't going anywhere, really casting herself as a new generation of candidate and pointing out that Donald Trump has not received between 30 to 40% of Republican supporters are voting against Donald Trump. So she's casting herself as a Trump alternative. Take a listen to her closing pitch.
This isn't an anti-Trump movement. This is a pro-America movement. This is something where they're saying they're tired of the chaos. They don't want 2 candidates in their 80s. They want to make sure that we go back to normal, and they want to see a DC that works for the people instead of government, instead of people working for government.
Now, even if Trump does well tonight, even if he does a clean sweep of the 15 states, he still falls shy of getting enough delegates to clinch the Republican presidential nomination. So that is another theory why Haley believes that she can stay in the race. So now it's up to the voters. We had a chance to speak to a few of them as they left the polling booth. Take a listen.
I voted for Nikki Haley. She should keep going. I don't think she'll win, but I think that she can give us another option, things to think about, maybe even down the line in 2028 for her future and our future.
So what made you not want to support Trump?
Well, I've always been a Republican, but he just rubs me the wrong way.
I like Nikki Haley, but I'm more of a Trump supporter. I like his policies. You know, he may be a little brash at sometimes, but you know, he did a good job as a president with policies and whatever, and the country needs somebody strong.
These legal troubles that are piling up against him, does that factor in your thinking?
Some of these court cases are just, you can tell they're politically motivated, and it's a shame.
May I ask you who you voted for and why?
Joe Biden. Age isn't an issue as long as you can do the job. If you want to make a change, go out there and run for office. But if you're not going to run for office or make a difference, go out and vote for who's on the ballot.
And people are coming out to vote. The voters are still streaming in here today. Polls are closing later tonight. But it's projected or expected that Donald Trump will have a good night. But again, even if he does sweep this all, he still falls short of clinching the number of delegates needed to clinch the nomination. On the Democratic side, Joe Biden is widely expected to sweep all 15 states. So it looks like it will be a rematch between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
That's a CBC's Richard Madden reporting from Fairfax, Virginia. We're taking your calls. How do you feel about the way U.S. politics is shaping up this year? And what would a Trump-Biden rematch mean for BC? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, we're bctoday@cbc.ca, and by text 236-330-2623. Joining me now is Matthew Lebo. He's a professor and chair of political science at the University of Western Ontario. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Are you expecting any surprises over these next few hours?
Not really. I think Donald Trump and Joe Biden are well on their way to clinching the nominations. Nikki Haley probably will not win any states today, but it is going to be interesting to see exactly what she does. She could carry on, but that seems unlikely. And if she does drop out, then I'll be looking to see, what does she say when she drops out? A lot of Trump's opponents have dropped out and turned around and endorsed him in the past, and she might not do that.
What do you think that means for her then? Why do you think she has stuck it out despite not having nearly the same amount of delegates as Donald Trump?
Well, she's really taken an anti-Trump stance for the last few weeks, and she's not that old, and she can run again. And it's possible that the Republican Party will evolve after Trump. Someday they'll get past Trump, and maybe people will be asking, who was it that stood up to Trump within the Republican Party? And she'd now be the first name on that list. So she might be setting herself up if the Republican Party sort of decides to redefine itself in a few years.
What about on the other side? Joe Biden has minimal opposition, but what are the polls telling us about his popularity and what the likelihood, what his chances might be in a general election?
Yeah, so the polls this time of year can be not very predictive of what will eventually happen in the fall election. And also sort of in the era that we're in, presidential approval never gets very high. So Donald Trump never got above 45%, and Joe Biden's hovering a little bit below 40%. It's really hard to get people from the other party to admit you're doing a good job, whether you are or not. So there are worries about Joe Biden, and there's lots of Democrats who are worried about his age or dislike some of his policies, especially towards Israel and Gaza. But probably 2020 is the best predictor of what will happen in 2024. Same two candidates, very similar electorates, and we saw that Joe Biden won by a lot, but just squeaked by in the Electoral College, and that's probably what will happen again this year.
For Canadians watching this, there are the headlines that we see. It's Super Tuesday today, court rulings, and there was a Supreme Court ruling this week that overruled a lower court ruling in Colorado about whether Trump could run there. What should Canadians, or what are Canadians thinking as they watch this developing right now?
I think Canadians are getting used to watching American politics kind of break down in a lot of ways. That democracy has been on the decline in the United States for a long time, long before Donald Trump came on the scene. And there's a lot of volatility in American politics, swinging back and forth between a Republican and a Democratic president. Alliances and agreements, they seem to come and go. And, Canadians are part of those agreements. We're part of NATO, we're part of NAFTA. And to see so much volatility in the States is worrisome. And to see, Donald Trump, who really is a source of a lot of volatility, to see him getting closer and closer to returning to the White House, that's something Canadians are thinking about too, I'm sure.
We are taking calls on this right now and asking you, how do you feel about the way that U.S. politics are shaping up this year? And what would a Trump-Biden rematch mean for British Columbians? What are your thoughts about it? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. By text, 236-330-2623. Rosa is calling us first from Victoria. Hi, Rosa.
Hi.
What are your thoughts watching Super Tuesday and U.S. politics?
I'm very worried. I'm worried about the politics in Canada right now. One of the parties that I used to vote for years ago is leaning very much towards the catastrophe that's happening in the United States. It's going to be very bad for our border, and we're watching democracy start to disintegrate.
What do you mean by catastrophe?
Well, because we have a border with Washington, and it was already stated by a certain person running in the United States that when we had the trouble in Toronto with the border going across with the truckers, that he sounded like it was a very good idea. That was something that he could continue.
You're talking about former President Trump?
That's right.
Okay. And so you're worried about a re-election of Trump, is that right?
Definitely worried about a re-election with Trump.
What do you think about the way that there are many Trump supporters? You still see people showing up even outside courthouses as if there were rallies. They are still turning up for him. And he has garnered all the support over most of the nomination runs in the U.S. so far.
And that's the worry. It shows that there's an underground that had been in a can for years in their way of thinking about people and politics, and somehow he has opened that can of worms and let it all come out, and now it's become very popular that people can say and do whatever they want and have no repercussions, as we can see what's happening with their Supreme Court.
Rose, thank you for your call. You're talking about this week's decision by the Supreme Court in the United States. Okay, Rose, thank you for your call. I'm sorry I got your name wrong earlier. I called you Rosa. Appreciate the call.
Okay.
You take care. Our number again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Let's go back to Matthew Lebo, professor and chair of political science at the University of Western Ontario. There she is, very worried about a re-election of Trump and saying that he opened up a can of worms in terms of what people can say and do without repercussion. I'm wondering if that does resonate with the public, with many in the public, as we obviously saw him elected in 2016. So, what is resonating when it comes to Trump with the public, and how should that be? Is that justified?
A lot of the history of American politics, we think about the civil rights movement and how such a significant chunk of the United States had segregation for 100 years after the Civil War. It took really both parties to move on to desegregate schools and public facilities and make sort of progress for 50 years from the 1960s onwards. But there was always there was still a lot of racial resentment in a lot of places. And really the presidency of Barack Obama brought a lot of that out, and Donald Trump, rose to political prominence by doubting the citizenship of Barack Obama, by saying there was something about Barack Obama that made him un-American, and really played on, hidden tones of racism within the United States when talking about borders, when talking about Muslims and immigrants, and sometimes African Americans as well. And so he has really played to those fears and brought out some really nasty strains of American politics, and it's a big change.
But why is it there then? How do you have that conversation around those sentiments?
I guess expecting that the politics of the 40s, 50s that lasted 100 years, that kept segregation in place, that was all just going to fade away was wishful thinking. That racial politics are still a huge part of American politics, and playing off one group of people against another still has some real, can work politically in a lot of places and with a lot of voters. And so, the United States has lots of progress, and it seems in most places that they're going the wrong way.
Tasha is joining us next in Richmond now. How do you feel about how U.S. politics are shaping up, Tasha?
Well, I'm very dismayed. I'm really down. I feel like everything I read, and I'm trying not to read it, and even this show, I understand the need to be current with what's going on day to day, but everything is pointing to a very, very dark time that could be, coming up if this person whose name I cannot say out loud begins with the letter T, gets reelected. And it feels like, the courts can't stop this person. Everyone's ganging up on Joe Biden and his age. There's that whole story. And there's also, the papers are all about, how Canada's getting ready for the doom and gloom. And I feel it. And more talk about authoritarianism. And I'm sorry, what could be on the horizon in Canada in the next election feels like a lot of the same. There's a Canadian politician whose name I also cannot say, who appears to be on the track to win. And we just finished celebrating the life of Brian Mulroney, and a different time in politics, where people had humanity and could work, or maybe not work. Well, sometimes they did work across party lines, but at least they had the decency to be, mature enough to care about each other. And I'm in my mid-60s. I haven't seen a time like this, and I'm very, very scared of it. And I wish that we just wouldn't even talk about it, and just let what happens, because it's going to be a year of predicting, just like, with the year 2000, it was like doom and gloom. And then the clock struck, and did anything happen? I feel like the buildup is really bad. And I'm going to say, stop it. Just stop with the buildup.
Okay.
Let's just let it go. And, get on to some positive things that are happening in the world, and stories of people helping each other and making a difference in people's lives. This is enough.
You have a very visceral reaction to...
I'm not the only one.
I appreciate hearing from you. Thanks so much for expressing that with us today. Let's take another call here before I wrap up. And I want to ask you, Matthew, about that polarization, how it is presenting itself here in Canada as well. But Dennis is joining us for a last comment on this in North Vancouver. Hi, Dennis.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to say that I'm a little bit surprised that alarm bells are not going off to the extent that I think they should be when you have somebody who is a serial criminal who's already been convicted on 2 serious charges, has 91 felonies coming up, including attempting in every way possible to overturn the last election's results. He is obviously an insurrectionist. How is he even allowed to run for president? I don't understand, but how he could be head in the poll really startles me.
Dennis, thank you so much. And let's get into those specific, the criminal cases and what the courts have actually decided when it comes to Donald Trump, and whether that does affect his potential run for the presidency, because there are experts divided as well, right? In terms of, because a lot of this is untrodden ground. Matthew.
Right. So, American politics is so polarized, so divided. It's not simply the policy differences between Democrats and Republicans. That's not that much wider a gap than it used to be. What really is the what's called affective polarization, and how much people identify with their own parties and how much they fear or dislike the other party. And that's just incredibly wide these days. And so even though Donald Trump is under indictment for 91 felonies, the polarized or the dislike of one party to the other party makes people on his side question the news, question the courts, question whether or not those charges are legitimate or whether they're just the Democrats getting revenge. On the Democratic side, they see courts doing the right job. They see, justice coming with 91 indictments, and they're just two different worldviews, two different realities and sources of information that have set these two groups so far apart that will lead one to, lead Republicans especially, that it doesn't matter what Donald Trump does. He's not Joe Biden. He's not a Democrat. And there's so much fear about what the Democratic Party does based on information that Republicans feed each other and feed themselves and get off the particular media that they watch, that, Trump is every bit as viable a candidate this year as in the last two election cycles.
What are you going to be watching for as a result of today? Let's take this step. I know that we had a caller saying, stop talking about it, but let's just take this step.
Yeah, if we think of Donald Trump like an incumbent president, someone who's already been president, then how he's doing in these primaries is really not great. So, we're to see the opposition party, a candidate, win one primary after another, maybe go 15 for 15 today, that's unusual. But to see a person who's been president challenged the way that Nikki Haley is challenging him is really rare. So like Gerald Ford was challenged by Ronald Reagan in 1976.
All right.
That was a good sign that he didn't have Republican support and he went on to lose. Jimmy Carter was challenged by Ted Kennedy in 1980. He went on to lose. George H.W. Bush in 1992, he went on to lose. So this is a sign that Trump will have a real hard time bringing in the anti-Trump Republicans. And that's a big enough chunk of the American electorate that he needs them.
Watch for. Matthew, I apologize for jumping in there. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Matthew Liebau, Chair of Political Science at the University of Western Ontario. It's 12:27. This is BC Today. Yesterday on the show, we talked about housing in BC. New legislation will take effect in May, limiting short-term rentals. We got this email from Joanne in Victoria. The provincial government allowed this industry to grow beyond sustainability. The federal government's share in responsibility of the housing strain with immigration numbers, especially temporary citizens who have taken up a large portion of rental properties. The Bank of Canada admitted they were late to bring in higher interest rates. So everyone shares in the blame, but I don't agree with people owning multiple units for this purpose. I think the government is trying to do the right thing, and with any government policy, some will be affected. And Joanne, thank you for that. We also talked about co-ownership, and Jan wrote in 1986, I was a newly single mom of elementary-aged children. Interest rates were through the roof. I bought into a non-stratified duplex with another couple. We had a house built in the early 1900s that had been renovated into two separate residences. Downstairs, one couple and 4 children. Upstairs, myself and 2 children. We shared a yard and often shared meals and family outings. If I wanted to take a night school course or go to a movie, when I had to take the babysitter home, we could turn on an intercom and my neighbor would listen to ensure my children were safe. It was an excellent solution that allowed me to live close to my workplace. All these years later, and we are still good friends. We had a contract that spelled out how we managed repairs and how a sale would be handled should it happen. It was a great arrangement. Jan, thank you for that. You can always let us know what you think. bctoday@cbc.ca is our address. It's 12:30 now. Before we get to news, the BC budget was handed down on February 22nd, as you know, but advocates have pointed out there hasn't been more provincial investment to expand the $10 childcare program. The BC government says it's determined to bring in more childcare spaces for $10, but critics have pointed out that the province is behind. We're going to take your calls on this and asking you, have you struggled to find childcare? And do you think it should be an election issue in this province? We're going to hear from advocate Sharon Gregson in a couple of moments. But first, here's an example of someone needing childcare. On budget day, we got this call to CBC from Sophie at Campbell River.
Hi, thank you. You might be able to hear my child crying in the background.
You sure
I apologize.
can. No, that's fine.
I'm an emergency room physician, and our emergency room really, really struggles to have consistent staffing. And I actually quit my job today because I cannot get daycare of any kind. Like, I can't get licensed daycare. I can't get private daycare. I'd be willing to have a nanny from overseas. That would cost about $50,000 a year. But even the program to do that has been paused. So I know that one of the things that they're saying is they want to support healthcare, and you cannot support healthcare without childcare because nurses, now doctors, are mostly women, like women with kids. And
You quit
very,
today?
very frustrating. Yeah, I quit today.
Oh, Sophie.
The wait lists are like 3 years, most of them.
Oh my, what are you going to do now, Sophie?
I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom.
That's Sophie in Campbell River, who's now a former ER physician. As she said, she had to quit her job that day when she called in, and that's due to the lack of childcare. We want to hear from you now, so you can give us a call right now. Are you struggling to find a childcare space or affordable childcare? Do you think it should be a provincial election issue? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. We'll get to your calls in a moment. First, here's your 12:30 CBC News update from Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. BC Housing is in court seeking the return of more than a dozen property titles after the buyers allegedly lied to take advantage of an affordable home ownership program in Victoria. They bought units in a condo development at below market rates intended to help middle-income families. Court documents suggest at least 13 buyers violated their agreements. WorkSafe BC says there has been another accident involving a construction crane, the fourth this year. The agency says the latest incident happened yesterday afternoon at a site in Vancouver. Nobody was hurt. Last month, a woman was killed after a load fell from a crane in the Oak Ridge neighborhood. And people in the Shuswap are asked to be on the lookout for wild pigs. The Columbia Shuswap Invasive Species Society says last summer's wildfires damaged fencing, which may have freed domestic pigs into the wild. Feral pigs are considered a destructive menace across North America, where they destroy vegetation, spread disease, and displace native wildlife. And now the forecast. The Arctic outflow warning continues for the north coast with wind chill values at -20, highs to -13 and sunny in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, lots of sunshine this afternoon with a high of -9. Highs reaching 2 with increasing cloudiness in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly cloudy with a high of 2 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with highs up to 6 degrees. And that's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you so much, Rob.
You are welcome.
Have you been cold? It's been cold.
Yeah, I've been cold. Yeah, it's cold.
I had to pull out my my thick jacket and just remembered it's not thick enough. I think I need another scarf and yet another. Certainly cold. It's not going to get too much warmer over the next few days either, is it?
No, we're not happy about that. And I was away for some time in the sun, and it's quite a shock, I must say. I was not anticipating this.
Yes, this is how it feels to be home.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you as well, because this coming Sunday, I think, is the Oscars. And so I don't know if you have a horse in the race or if there's a film that you've been really passionate about.
I would say no.
No?
No, I mean, I saw...
Why am I not surprised?
Well, I don't really watch the Oscars, but I did see, the atomic bomb movie, which I enjoyed.
Oh, my goodness. What?
Oppenheimer, thank you.
Oppenheimer, yes. I was going to say Barbenheimer.
I did see Barbie as well.
You did?
Is Barbie nominated?
You know what? I don't know.
Okay.
Let's find out.
I would say Oppenheimer over Barbie.
Oppenheimer is, yes. I did go see Barbie. I'm going to watch Oppenheimer on streaming, but I did go see. It was a big event. We all wore pink.
I remember that.
It was you.
No, you went with your daughter, correct?
I went with my daughter, my son, and my husband.
Nice.
And everybody wore pink. It was a whole thing.
It was good.
We
that
won't wear
Barbie.
pink this Sunday. It was fun. I don't know if it was, Oscar, whether it's going to win an Oscar, but it was a lot of fun to go. So I'll put it that way. Oppenheimer, not fun, but also very, very well done.
Mark says Barbie is up for Best Picture. Was that Mark?
Oh,
Yes.
there you go. Okay.
So there you go.
It will be controversial if it doesn't win any
Perhaps.
kind of award, as it was in the Golden Globes. We will talk about it some more. Rob, thank you.
Okay.
Rob Zimmerman. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Well, since the provincial budget was released a few weeks ago, critics and advocates have been asking, where's the expansion of $10 daycare? There are questions around the province not using up federal dollars for childcare, and the opposition, BC United, are wondering why. And they refer to $10 daycare being a campaign promise for 2 elections. Here's BC United childcare critic Corinne Kirkpatrick speaking in the legislature yesterday.
The NDP's inability to deliver on their signature election promise of $10 a day is evident. Less than 10% of the promised childcare spaces are offered at that pledged $10 a day rate. So of those lucky enough to even find childcare, 9 out of 10 of those families are unfairly deprived of the affordable childcare they were assured in successive elections. This is another example, Mr. Speaker, of this government spending more and doing less.
Now, Premier David Eby was asked yesterday if his government is committed to delivering $10 daycare. Here was his response.
So the commitment to British Columbians is a straightforward one. We said over a 10-year period, we are going to build out an affordable, accessible childcare program, and our goal is $10 a day for British Columbians. We started with an average rate, and I take your point that these are different words, but this is an important measurement. The average British Columbian was paying more than $50 a day for childcare, and now the average British Columbian is paying less than $20 a day for childcare, and we're going to keep driving those numbers down. Our target is $10 a day. That's where we're headed as a government, and we're going to continue to do that work. At the same time as we're driving down costs, we also have to increase availability, and to do it as quickly as possible. This is a big challenge, obviously, that we've set out for ourselves, but we're going to do that work.
We're asking you to call in and let us know, have you struggled to find childcare spaces or affordable childcare? And do you think childcare should be an issue in this year's provincial election? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me right now is Sharon Gregson. She's a spokesperson with the Coalition of Childcare Advocates. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us, Sharon.
Hello, Michelle.
Let's go back to the BC budget, because that's where all the discussion has stemmed from. What was your own reaction?
Surprise, really. Surprise that government acknowledges that more women are able to participate in the workforce because of the childcare progress that's been made since 2018. Surprise that they aren't stepping up their investment, that they aren't building out $10 a day childcare more quickly, that the federal dollars are not being fully utilized. Just surprised that they're not taking more advantage of the opportunity to give British Columbians the childcare system that they want and need.
What is happening with that? And we've seen reports from Rob Shaw at the Orca on the progress on that federal funding. What is happening there? Why is it being underutilized?
Well, first I step back to say it is incorrect to say that the whole 10 a day investment is a failure. There are 14,000 families every day who experience $10 a day childcare for whom it's life-changing. There are tens of thousands of other families who have their fees reduced, and there are early childhood educators who are receiving a $6 an hour wage enhancement. So there has definitely been progress, and that's the starting place. And the progress has been really great news for families, great news for system building. The problem is that it seems to have stalled. So in this budget year, we're seeing the federal government contribute over $1 billion to childcare in British Columbia. The provincial government stalling their investment at about $800 million. So big numbers, but that's what it takes to build a childcare system where we started from almost nothing, frankly, in 2017 to over 10 years having a high quality licensed childcare space at no more than $10 a day, where educators are well qualified and fairly compensated. So we knew it was going to be needed a concerted investment. We just are seeing that stall at the moment, and federal dollars not being fully spent, no more provincial dollars being added, not enough new spaces, not enough $10 a day spaces, and the long-awaited wage grid for early childhood educators is nowhere to be seen.
And so 7 years into that 10-year timeline for, expanded $10 daycare, are we going to meet that?
Well, with a concerted effort, yes, it's still possible. So right now we could be transitioning more existing childcare programs over to the 10 a day funding model. We could be introducing the wage grid for early childhood educators of at least $30 to $40 an hour to help solve the terrible recruitment and retention crisis in the sector. We could be working with school districts to do a massive expansion of school-age childcare using existing elementary schools for before and after school care. We could be working with municipal governments and nonprofits to expand care for 0 to 4-year-olds. So there's lots that could be done right away to improve the childcare system in our province.
Sharon Gregson is my guest with the Coalition of Childcare Advocates, and we are asking you, have you struggled to find childcare, whether it's a space or an affordable space? And let us know as well if you think that this is an issue that should be a part of the provincial election this year. Let us know. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Chris is joining us. Thanks so much for calling early, Chris, from Kelowna. What's your experience?
There, I was doing something else. It's a hot topic issue, but the reality for people in Britain. So I'm freshly in from Ontario, and prior to that, Quebec. So my perspective is different than this is for, I think, some of the British Columbia people. But the stall that I think the last caller was just talking about, that stall in people who have access to British Columbia's $10 a day system is going to continue and actually go a bit parabolic. Think Quebec, as that childcare program is almost fully collapsed. There will be no childcare, $10 childcare in British Columbia. Like they were talking about, 10 years from now. There is no 10 years from now. It'll be finished for that.
Is this something that you've experienced yourself?
Yeah, because at $10 a day, the daycares are going to close.
Because it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not a pure capitalist, but you have to admit that capital is smart, and so entrepreneurs will have to make a decision shortly in British Columbia, as they have in other provinces where it's falling apart. They'll say, well, I'm going to invest in a daycare, or I'm going to invest in a Tim Hortons or a McDonald's or a flower shop. And so you're going to see that money disappear from the industry. And like my wife, we just moved here. She could not work at Kelowna General in the middle of a healthcare crisis, similar to, I think, 2 callers ago, that physician that had to quit because we could not find childcare. In Ontario, at least, we could pay for childcare, and she was able to work. But here in British Columbia, they didn't have that option, regardless of how much money you have.
So you're
women will not be able to return to work. And then I think there was the previous caller mentioned, down the road, there'll be more money to help solve the worker pay and retention program, worker and retention within the industry. But but that's fanciful as well. So fewer and fewer people will be able to enjoy this $10 a day program as it falls in upon itself. The solution, I don't know why it's a bad word in Canada, but the solution will have to be a two-tier program, because as governments get out of, governments are out of money now, so everything will start to get cut back. You're going to have to let a two-tier system come in. Those that can afford a private daycare will have to be allowed, and you'll have some spots subsidized by the government for $10 a day.
More. Okay. And should that be limited to $10 a day for private daycares?
No, it's insane. You can't. It's not a real number.
Okay.
$10 is not a real.
Okay.
It might have been 5 to 8 years ago. It's no longer a real number.
Okay. And so you are still without childcare? Is that right?
What's that?
You're still without childcare?
Well, we're paying for a private.
You've been able to find it.
So she's back at.
Okay.
But it's really, it's an unfortunate. $10 a day will work for the limited people that can get into it, and an increasing amount of people will be shut out from it.
Okay. Chris, thank you so much for the call from Kelowna and your perspective as well. And I can see, Sharon Gregson, as you're listening, you disagree. You've been shaking your head. Let's talk about Quebec for a second as an example. He says it's collapsed. There have been studies that said that it's a system that's paid for itself when it comes to providing universal childcare. So what are the lessons from Quebec?
Well, you're quite right. I couldn't disagree with the caller more. Actually, for Quebec families who access what's called the CPEs, the system is a great success. It's affordable for far more families. You're right, though, it's lessons learned from Quebec. We're not trying to duplicate what has happened there. They started their affordable childcare system in 1998, so they're much further down the road. Whereas we only have enough childcare here for about 24% of children. In Quebec, it's getting close to 60%. So they're much further ahead in developing a system. So the lessons to learn from Quebec are to expand in the nonprofit system, where, unlike the caller said, it's entrepreneurs looking to open a daycare or Tim Hortons. That's not the childcare that we want for British Columbia. That's not where the research shows the quality and the affordability is. And so we want to make sure that expansion happens quickly through school districts, through municipal governments, through nonprofits. And, there's lesson to be learned from Quebec, but it's certainly not an imploded system. It's after 12 years, it was paying for itself with 70,000 more women able to participate in the workforce. And that's the beauty of childcare, is it's not just a cost. It actually has a return when families can have more people who are going out to work and spending money in their local economy, and frankly, paying income tax to the provincial and federal governments, which offsets their investment. So it's a good news story for government. It's the workforce behind the workforce. If we're going to invest in healthcare, we need to invest in childcare so that healthcare workers can actually go to work. It's a proven recipe, and we can learn not just from Quebec, from other provinces and around the world.
Let's hear from Jack now in Vancouver. Hi, Jack. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a child that is almost 3 years old, but before she was born, 6 months ahead of time, we already have registered for many daycare. Now, we didn't hear any one of them until maybe one of them about 2 weeks ago. We have a daycare that is from a private person, but this is the struggle. Like, we want to create new generation, but we are worried that we cannot find daycare. How are we going to work? We are expecting twins coming, so this is something that we really worry about, because what's going to happen for the two new child that we still need to look for daycare. And this is a struggle that not just for me, but for many people, like in my neighborhoods, all of us are struggling. All of us talk about that. We better go register beforehand, and none of them really have anything. Sometimes it's just a luck of a draw.
Right. And so you've already registered for your twins, I imagine.
I did.
Yeah.
But we hope we can find something.
Do you think then that this, is this on your mind as we head into an election year?
Of course, absolutely. Like, even in the Vancouver local situation that we look at, why is this not more? Because the population is so high. This is something that we're definitely concerned and look into. One of the reasons that I vote for the provincial government is because of they set the child care. And I don't really know is that the procedure is really working well for us. So I'm definitely listen to it and see what is the next election, what is the better situation.
What impact does this have on your family, Jack?
Say that one more time. Sorry,
What impact is this having on your family?
Well, it's stressful living spaces, stressful as to working option, etc. So this is something that we really worry about.
Jack, thank you so much for your call.
Thank you.
Just Jack in Vancouver. Ashley's up next in Chemainus. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. What are your thoughts on childcare? What's your experience?
So I am the primary caregiver in our family of 2 young children. One's school age and one is preschool age. And in our area, we are lucky to have some options. However, my friends and I are, constantly on wait lists for years at a time waiting for childcare so that we can resume our careers. And it's a constant struggle. It affects our day-to-day lives. It affects our well-being and our income. There's a really specific case in our area. There's a really lovely nonprofit organization called the Chemainus Crofton Schools Association, and they provide a wide range of young education services for kids in our area. They do before and after school care for school age kids. They do a preschool. They run Pro-D day camps, and they really provide a high quality of care for young kids in our area. And unfortunately, they have a unique circumstance being a nonprofit association where they are really stuck between a rock and a hard place in the sense that they're limited by what they can charge families for their services because they're eligible for grants and funding from the government and things like that. And I'm not directly involved within the inner workings of the association, so I don't know the numbers specifically. Sure. We use their products, like I just mentioned, but it's a real challenge for them, and they're faced the next year or so, they might just completely have to shut down because of their financial hardship. And it would be a huge loss to our 2 communities that really rely on their services. And not only do they have spaces for kids and provide care for kids, they're also wonderful. It's high quality care. And so really what it comes down to now is, the administrators are spending all of their valuable time writing grants. They're looking for other opportunities for government funding to keep them afloat. We're collecting bottles and having fundraisers. The parents were just trying to keep it together.
Wow.
It's really hard to see, for an organization that already exists. There's already infrastructure in place. They already have buildings and people and ECs.
And do they charge is it a $10 facility?
Well, so the only specific daycare they provide is in Crofton, and I'm not sure about that one. I can't speak to that because I don't use that facility. But the services that we use are subsidized. The Pro-D day camps are subsidized for sure. So I can't say if they run $10 a day childcare, but they definitely have. They do subsidize their.
And their future is uncertain at this point.
Yeah, their future is uncertain, and it's.
What would you do?
I don't know. I think that what would happen is there would be a private organization that would come in and fill that void, like a private daycare, a nonprofit, and they would have, it would be for profit. So the rates would be different, probably more expensive. And that actually happened to this same organization a couple years ago. They were putting in for a contract to open a new daycare right in Chemainus, where I live, right next to my daughter's elementary school. And unfortunately, the finances were such that they just couldn't do it. And so a private organization came in, and great that the service is there, but it made it unaffordable for a lot of families who were hoping to access that programming.
Wow. Ashley, thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Good to hear from you. Yes, so Sharon Gregson, that question again of sustainability for lower cost, affordable daycares. Is it a sustainable model? How can this organization keep going?
Right. So a couple of things from your last caller. she's quite correct that childcare is a gender equity issue. It does impact women. It impacts whole families, but particularly on women. And there has to be sustainability in the system, which means just as we want our elementary schools to be publicly funded, high quality facilities with well qualified and compensated teachers in K to 12, we also want the same for early childhood education. So that means there has to be a robust operating formula that allows for human resources, a decent wage grid for educators, facility maintenance, etc. So there has to be some standards across the province in operating funds to make sure that nonprofits are sustained, because the caller is also correct that when a for-profit operator moves in, costs do go up. And in fact, 2023 research shows that in the cities that have more for-profit childcare, their fees are typically higher for families as well. So cities like Richmond have got higher fees than cities like Vancouver, which has more nonprofit childcare. And so these are this is real-time data that we can learn from as we build out BC's childcare system.
It is certainly something to watch over these next few months. I'm sure we'll have this conversation again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Sharon Gregson is with the Coalition of Childcare Advocates. A lot of emails have been coming in as well. Jody writes, when my son was in kindergarten around 1993, Senior Trudeau promised $10 daycare. I was so hopeful. Now Junior Trudeau also promised this. I believe it is a carrot and not a real plan ever. It's so sad for those families who voted Liberal like I did in hopes for this plan that will probably never come. Sarah writes, I have 3 children in daycare and I'm a healthcare provider. It was impossible to find daycare, let alone $10 daycare. So now we pay $2,000 per month in order for our children to have a safe, welcoming environment. Honestly, despite the price tag, I much prefer the care outside of a facility. $10 a day daycare is only available in large group care. They're impersonal, a petri dish of sick kids, and my kids would be separated. Not together like they are now, which concerns us with a child with higher needs. $10 a day daycare does not and will not benefit us. There needs to be investment in providing flexible childcare solutions than throwing money at one aspect, which is $10 of care. Thank you so much for your emails. BC Today at cbc.ca once again is where you can send your thoughts on anything you hear on the program.